Good afternoon, Facebook. This is Teresa B coming to you live with amplified exposure. Today, I have my lovely guest, Judge Joe Brown, came all the way on my screen because he likes me. So he
All
came,
right.
he came to visit me today, and I'm so honored and blessed that he came today. How are you today, Judge Joe Brown?
My dear, I'll manage.
So, I have just a couple of questions for you, and I'm so glad you joined us tonight. I'm sure that we have a lot of people waiting for you to log on, so I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions tonight by the time we're done. But if you could please tell the audience, when did you get started in law, and how long in law before you made it to a television show?
Oh, about 50 years ago at UCLA. And when did I get the TV thing?
Mm-hmm.
That was 22 years ago, right about now.
Okay. So, who came up with the idea that you should be a judge on TV?
Well, there was this guy named Peter Brennan. He was from Australia. He did the courtroom beat there. He ragged out Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch got impressed, brought him to America. He did some successful tabloid shows. There was this other character named Larry Little. He and Aaron Spelling had a great dispute because Larry Little is difficult to deal with. Spelling tried to fire him. He had a no-cut contract, so he sent him into Siberia for a while, got tired of paying him for doing nothing, and then brought in Peter Brennan and said, create some shows. So they bought Moesha from the CEO of CBS. Then Peter Brennan started Judy. Then they wanted her to take less money, so they brought me in to intimidate her, and then they came up with the Parkers. Viacom bought the whole box worth of goodies the following year, and we went there, and it's been a never-ending up and down battle against the filth of Hollywood and trying to do right. Now, I wasn't doing a show per se. We got sued very early, and it went up to the California Supreme Court, so they declared me a qualified arbitrator under California law and ruled that what I was doing was binding contractual arbitration. A few years later, the U.S. Supreme Court, involving Judge Alex in a matter, backed that up and said what was going on is binding contractual arbitration under the U.S. 1928 Act. So what I was doing was official and binding anywhere in the country. And it wasn't a show, it was televised arbitration. The California Supreme Court dictated some standards that had to be applied, and I had a constant battle with idiots in Hollywood to get them to understand that they'd bought into a situation where they had a tiger by the tail that could bite them. The Supreme Court said if you violated anything that I had told them they had to do, they could go to jail. However, they didn't get it. They kept trying to slant things the way they wanted. And I said, drop dead, go to hell. I'm not going to do it that way, or I will go and you can all go to hell again. I quit 3 or 4 times. But anyway.
So you quit 3 or 4 times?
Yeah, there was some slow down, backstabbing sleazes. They fired Peter Brennan after they gave him permission to marry one of his producers, a very beautiful woman named Miss Lisa, who had formerly been Miss Philippines in the Miss World contest. And then as soon as he did that, they fired both of them. They said, aha, well, you didn't have to believe us, did you? But it was really filthy. These people Hollywood is a cesspool. But some
Mm-hmm.
places in it are sumps that are a little bit lower than the rest of the cesspool and a little bit filthier. I find it amazing that the American public models so much of what they do on the sick puppies that run Hollywood. They sit around tables drinking wine and nibbling cheese and crackers and bragging about how wrong they have done each other and how many knives they've put in each other's backs, caused each other to lose girlfriends, boyfriends, husbands, wives, or whatever the case may be, and giggle about it. Frankly, that would, in the real world, cause most people to lose their kneecaps for acting that low down. But it is what it is. So after 15 years and they owed me some money and wanted me to effectively take an IOU, I said, go to hell. I'm out of here. I've had enough of this poison. But I was trying to bring a message of decency to the American public, and they always tried to get in the way of that. So it got to be what it was, and they wouldn't let you know, but I became the highest paid man of all of television, with the exception of Leslie Moonves, who was with CBS as its CEO. He's the one that they let go with the sexual misconduct allegations, so
Mm-hmm.
far unproven. And they're pushing the country to do that. I didn't have too much problem with the gay guys, but the lesbians from the first month, they just hated the idea of having to work with a straight black man. And they said so over and over again. So it got to a point where every third or fourth taping, I just say, look, you go to hell up in there. You aren't high enough on the food chain to fire me, so drop dead. And if you don't shut the F up, we're going to stop until you do. So they declared war, and I have seen how filthy what they do is for anything they touch. And they've touched the American public, and they've got their little sharpened claws in it, and it's not good for the republic nor anybody concerned.
So when did you call it quits? When did you say
After 15 years, and I got over for full retirement age,
okay? And what did you do after that?
I'm retired. I write, consult, and try to cause as much trouble as I can. And
Okay.
there's this other problem right now. Black America has no leadership. None. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
effective. There are a few people with some promise, but there's nobody with any leadership capability. They either don't know enough, or they've been bending over, dropping their boxers down to their ankles, or if they've got the other kind of equipment, they've been spreading too many knees and going down the munch. So those people have no vested interest in tomorrow. I do. I'm a grandfather, so I try to make everything all right for those who follow me with the bloodline,
Mm-hmm.
having something there to look forward to.
So did you do anything as far as Black Lives Matter or any of the march?
Hell no, I wouldn't support that bunch of charlatans if you gave me their 10-foot pole. It has nothing to do with black people. I call it black lesbian mania. If you read what we believe, which is their mantra, start from the bottom. Don't go down from the top. They actually discuss how they know ordinary black people won't read that far. But if you go down to the bottom, work back up, the second paragraph from the bottom is lifted straight from NAMBLA. That's North American Man Boy Love Association. It's a pedophile thing. The next paragraph up says, we are a queer affirming network. And then they go up using the slur cis, and they talk about they want to dismantle cisgender privilege, meaning straight people. They talk about having their trans brothers and sisters lead, and talk about the real problem is not Trayvon Martin, is not what happened in Ferguson, does not happen with the late Mr. Floyd. It's what's happening to their trans sisters, or whatever in the hell that is. I don't know. Sounds like a bunch of drag queens. And then they go up talking about they want to dismantle the traditional nuclear family. So everything that black people and decent people ought to be standing for, they are against, and it's a bait and switch thing. You find that if you contribute to them, it goes through something called Act Blue, which is a Democratic Party front organization, and they used to list the names of all of the Democratic candidates that they had donated money to. And as far as that goes, the Democratic Party is no longer viable in my estimation because it's become like it once used to be the Dixiecrats. Now it's the Demogatics, Gaytics, or Gaytes. It's been co opted by LGBT queer. And I say this, I don't have anything against homosexuals. You can do what the hell you want to do in your own bedroom, but can't stay the hell out of my living room because the kids of people I know and their grandchildren are confused enough anyway. You've tried to destroy decency in the country. You've tried to, not you, but euphemistically,
I ain't do nothing, Judge Joe Brown. I
they
ain't do
they've
nothing.
tried to destroy manhood and womanhood. I think it's an abomination how they have come in with failed little boy athletes who can't do a damn thing against real men, so they want to claim being girls and compete against girls in especially full contact sports. And I'm a firm believer that boys shouldn't hit girls. And they
So,
are abusing things and they're not leading this country well. And Biden has been suspected of being that way for years. And he promised just recently he would get either a gay male or a lesbian female. Well, I guess that's an oxymoron, a lesbian or a gay guy to be his running mate. So since there are rumors on Camilla too, I guess that's what he got. And she, by the way, is not black. We have to stop being so damned ignorant and understand that there are people who are considered Caucasian who can get quite dark. She's a Tamil Brahmin by ancestry on both sides, and that's what she is. She's not a black American. She's not an African descendant, other than the fact that all humans are from out of Africa, but that was long ago. So she has been running that bait and switch slut game on California, and now she's starting to do it on the country. And Tamil Brahmins, they can be fine people. They are India's intellectual caste. They're at the top of the heap. Only thing over them is a series of gods, and everything else is below them. So
so,
they have one problem that I think shows her lack of character. They are bringing this thing called untouchability from India to America, and a lot of Indian American citizens are really wronged by this untouchability. What that means is if somebody brushes up against you and you are supposed to be an untouchable, that person has to go through purification rites because you are essentially filth. Your job is to chase rats, and if you want to get fed, you chase rats and eat them. That's how bad it is. So you can be a PhD, but if you are on the bottom caste, you are untouchable, and that has begun to spread to the United States. And as an Indian American senator, she ought to have the decency to come up with some kind of legislation to do something about it. As it is, she and the likes of Cory Booker have also deceived the public when Juicy Jesse, aka Jussie Smollett, came up with this fake thing about the noose that the Chicago police have video footage of him buying at a costume shop the week of Halloween. Well, they had the Equality Act that was introduced by John Conyers way back 23 years ago, and it's been languishing. So they restyled it the anti lynch bill. It passed without debate in the House after that. It's called the Equality Act, but it does not say a damn thing about lynching. It doesn't say anything about black folk, but it introduces a lot of language that goes a long way toward justifying pedophilia and makes the practice of that is child molestation, not subject to prosecution. So it's filth for the American public, and if the Republican dominated Senate has any decency, they'll keep it bottled up in committee.
You know what, Judge Joe Brown? I think you should have ran for president.
Oh, I think I could do as well as anybody that's in contention and better than at least one of them. And, speaking of which, I've been familiar with that clown Biden for at least 50 years. Studied him. 1967, he was running for state office and he had John B. Stennis. He had let's see, who else did he had? Faubus. He had all of these old line Southern racist governors coming down to Delaware to campaign for him. He called them his friends, his mentors, his role models, and he promised to dedicate the rest of his career to following in their filthy racist footsteps. And he started famously way back when he was young, in his 20s, talking about he understood what the Negro wanted. He Negroes were animals, and anywhere they were turned into jungles and zoos, and he wasn't letting his children go to school with animals in the zoo. That's the one that the Demogatic Party is running for president. He was against desegregation of schools. He also indicated when he was campaigning that he was sorry that Delaware, a slave holding state, did not go with the Confederacy. And he blamed the failure because Delaware was so close to the Union Army, the Army of the Potomac, operating out of Washington, D.C. He repeated that often. For the 1979 and 80 crime reform bill, he was a strong proponent of, well, they got it passed where 10 rocks got the same sentence as a full kilo of pure cocaine. Also, he was one of the people that utilized that racist dog, Strom Thurmond, in the Senate. And he's been in the Senate, got in the Senate 47 years ago, and he's been a racist dog ever since. He's been a fake, a fraud, a con man. He's probably done enough stuff that ought to put him in a federal penitentiary for bribery and extortion. I said quite often when they had those impeachment hearings, be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. And if anybody paid attention and listened to something other than Demogatic dominated CNN, they would have found out that there was much evidence of crimes committed in office, but it was by Biden and Obama, not Donald Trump. By the way, that was a farce with them returning those articles of impeachment that didn't even state a cause. Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution says the president and vice president can be impeached and, if convicted, removed from office for three things: 1, treason; 2, bribery; and 3, high crimes or misdemeanors in office. They charged Trump with abusing his authority, but that's not a crime, so that was out. They charged him with obstructing Congress, and that's out. Hell, every time a president vetoes an act of legislation, that's the same thing. So they didn't even state a cause. And as a former judge, I know, or a retired judge, I know that if there is an action in front of you, and if you take everything in the light best suited against, as to the party against who a motion for summary judgment is made, you look at it and you say, that doesn't even state a case. So you're out of here. And that's what the Senate did appropriately. We spent all that time, wasted all that money grandstanding. And meanwhile, a lot of House committees were busy little beavers going around trying to add riders on bills to promote LGBT queer. And they say that on their website. That's what the Q stands for, questioning and queer. And BLM claims to be third paragraph from the bottom of what we believe. They claim to be a queer affirming network. So, yeah, I don't mind them being gay or lesbian or whatever they are, but they're messing up the children and they're trying to emasculate the country, and that's taking the masculine component out of the equation. See, there's
So,
there's
so
an
let
important thing. It's like women and children in the lifeboat first when the Titanic sinks, but these people, they want to get in drag and sneak in with the women where the men ought to be around and plucking them out of those lifeboats and throwing them into the water on the other side of the sinking ship is
wait a
chum
minute,
for the sharks.
wait a minute, Judge Joe Brown, you live. You do know you live, right?
I am fine.
You are live and
I'm
direct.
fine. I don't bite my tongue. I never have. But if anybody doesn't like it, come get me.
Let me ask. Let's get off politics. Let me start asking questions about when you did your show. Did you have some? I'm trying to get my thoughts together. Did you have some shows where there was conflict or where there were people that ended up going to jail?
Yes, they did. Matter of fact, I got a nice tour to Indianapolis, tour the Speedway, and what happened is I exposed a ring where somewhere around 60, 70 people got secretly indicted for fraud.
Oh, wow. So that's
there
the
are
part
other
that
consequences. Some idiot was working with an interstate car theft ring, and he decided to moonlight. So some stupid woman came on there to complain that her friend wouldn't get her this car, a hot car. No, it was a concurrent. It was a vehicle, a Chevy, I think, for that year. And I was saying, well, what were you supposed to be paying for? $500. You're gonna get a brand new car for $500. Yeah, it's hot. So you're in here to sue for breach of contract to sell you a hot car. And the fool came on. He didn't survive a month after it being televised before he turned up dead with a few bullets in him.
Oh,
See,
wow.
I wouldn't take these cases if they hadn't been filed in somebody's real small claims court. Like the California Supreme Court said, it was for binding arbitration, contractual arbitration. So I arbitrated and it was real, and I didn't have anybody helping me make a decision like most of these so-called TV judges do. See, a lot of them aren't even judges. They're just auditioned for the part. Maybe they were a lawyer. Some weren't even that. So it's just fake, and they get somebody telling them what to do. And when they get ready to render a verdict, they hop up out of the chair and take a recess. That's so somebody can tell them what to do. But they didn't have anybody with my kind of experience. See, I was in my 50s when I started in this stuff.
Mm-hmm. So did you and Judge Judy compete a lot? Because I know.
No, she didn't have the breadth of experience I did. See, what happened, she put her husband, Shineland, through law school, had some kids, then she went to law school. She got out of law school at about 30, passed the bar, and Mayor Koch of New York was looking for a young Jewish female to head some domestic dispute courts where lawyers were not allowed to practice. So she's never had a jury trial. She's never had a bench trial, never filed a motion, never had an appeal. And for most of her career, lawyers couldn't even practice in front of her, and her judicial temperament is not good.
Mm-hmm.
And
so,
judges aren't supposed to act like she does.
Okay. So do you find that happening a lot with the judges that are on TV now? That they
No, there are some good ones.
Okay.
There are a few good ones. There are some amazingly poor ones that have been on there.
Mm-hmm.
And it is what it is. One or two of them need to get some bass in their voice, but
Which ones are those?
you can think of it. Just think about who needs to get some bass in his voice when he talks.
So did you have to train any of the television judges?
No, they tried to replace me with Nancy Grace, who is a sleazeball. Uh, Senator Feinstein's daughter, who kind of struck me like she jumped out of a time machine. From 1967, looking like a granny dress wearing hippie with long, crinkly hair that needed to be worked on. No makeup, anything like that, in Birkenstocks. And then somebody out of Detroit that wore orange slacks, sherbet orange slacks, and lime green coat, who was, I don't know what he was, but he wasn't what I was. So Fox didn't want to have that and told them to kiss it goodbye. You're in breach of contract. Which, by the way, see, television is, for instance, Judy, myself, Maybelline Ephraim for Divorce Court, we all shot on the same sound studio at KTLA Channel 5 Studios on Sunset and Van Ness, right down from the 101 freeway. But interestingly enough, KTLA Channel 5 did not carry either of those three shows. Judy and I were part of the Viacom network, and we, for several years, were carried by Paramount. But Paramount was like 5 blocks away, but we didn't get taped at Paramount. We got taped at Channel 5. It was a bad place to work because the studio that we were in, the sound stages, was completed in 1928, and they had all of this old cotton lagging that was packed into the walls with some tar over it, and the tar was crumbling, and all of that stuff was escaping. And half the people had bright red eyes after the first half hour of being in that place. And then they had an old pool that they had boarded over that they used to use for these, I think it was John Taylor dancers from back in the 40s, where they'd swim and they do these coordinated swim routines, and they'd filled it in with old tires down in there when you opened up a hatch, and there were oil fields nearby, and oil was halfway up the sides of the pool, and it was a real mess being in there.
Mm-hmm.
But I
So
mean, it was what it was. And then they'd have some little lesbian girl come over from the headquarters who's 23 years old with 1 year junior college, and she was a file clerk 2 weeks before and would become an executive a week later because she did some sexual favors for somebody's lesbian wife or something, or a lesbian executive over there, and now she's an executive, and they'd send somebody like that over to tell me, I don't appreciate how you ruled on that case. Oh, you don't? Well, I tell you what, security, get her the devil out of here. Nothing happens until she's gone. Called from headquarters, how dare you? You want me to come over there and put my foot up your behind? I'll do it. Okay, and that literally was some of the conversation that went on.
So, Judge Joe Brown, you sound like you from the streets. Like,
I grew up in Los Angeles.
okay. Which part?
Matter of fact, it was 58th Place in Normandy, third house from the corner on the south side of the street, which is right next street over Slauson. So it was Normandy where it crosses Slauson. Wasn't the worst place, wasn't the best either, but you know, we had gang activity which disappeared 1965 after the August uprising.
Mm-hmm. Were you involved in anything in
No,
the
hell
community?
no. I wouldn't get in that punk stuff. Most of those fools that were in the gang bit, they were crybabies in the fifth and sixth grades, always crying for their mamas and snot running down their face and tears. And then seventh and eighth, they joined some gang, and then they wanted to go for bad from them. They didn't have fathers in the home either. Like, for example, there was strong there was a strong masculine presence in the neighborhood, but there was one house on the corner where this woman had 14 children, about
Mm.
8 or 9 of them girls, and at least 10 different baby daddies, and it was a whorehouse, basically. So starting at 11, 12, 13 years old, they were selling booty, and it was a bad thing. And all of the trouble in the neighborhood came in through that place because they had all of the young nascent thugs over there who didn't have any daddy at home. So I always associated gang activity where you got no daddy. And I liked my old man. He was a war hero, and he wasn't anybody to mess with, and he got you straight.
Okay. Were you the only child?
Yes.
Okay. I'm an only child too from my mother. So,
Yeah.
did you see any of these people that you grew up with when you became a judge? Did you?
Almost all of them were dead.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Street stuff. Wife shot him, died in the penitentiary, or had a heart attack.
And you the only survivor.
Something like that. See, I always had my nose in a book. Man, how come you always reading these books, Joe, man? You need to something. Look, man, you gonna do what you gonna do. I'm reading this magic so I can work some spells. Well, man, we got this. No, I ain't gonna do that, man. You got that's criminality, man. Because you ain't talking about ripping off something big. You talking about doing something to your neighbors. I ain't with you.
So you were able to stay off the street, do what you had to do, went through school, became a judge, and you were
It
that
wasn't quite that simple.
not quite that
I
simple.
never wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a judge. What I wanted to be was a physicist or a scientist, engineer, or a doctor.
Hmm.
Thanks to St. Ron the Ray Gun, when he became California governor, and he wanted to destroy the free higher education that we had because he said the only people that were taking advantage of it were long haired, pinko commie hippies who sympathized with our enemies. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to have to wait too long to get the courses I needed, and um, Ho Chi Minh waited, but my faculty advisor said, you have vertebrate paleontology as a minor. You've got physics as a would-be major, but you'll have to wait another year and a half to get what you need to graduate with that. And you've got political science as a minor and military science as a minor. You can declare political science right now. You have enough credits, and that'll get you out, and maybe you can go to school and teach political science. I don't be damn poli sci professor. Hell no. Somebody said, well, try law school. I don't want to be any damn lawyer, but I wound up being one. So it is what it is. That's 50 plus years ago. So it's too late to squawk about it now. Wouldn't do much good.
Well, you've had a long lasting and successful career.
Yeah, let me tell you about it.
Yeah, tell me about
Okay. A good friend of mine recruited me to join him as a playground director at Trinity Avenue Elementary School. There was a now Dr. Ron Chappelle there, and there was a Dr. Clifford Stewart, also known as Sensei, Guru, Grandmaster, and Pendecker Stewart. He also worked as an executive on my show. He's not doing well now, and I worry about him. But we had a playground, and two of our more illustrious graduates from the playground, one of them was a skinny little 12-year-old. He's dead now. You know him as Barry White, the singer. And another one was a skinny little 12-year-old. He was the last person executed on California's death row. He was Tookie Williams, who started, if I recall, the Crips. Now, I've also been a substitute teacher for the LA City School System, now known as the LA Unified School System. I had an internship at a DC think tank where, interestingly enough, I was assigned three places: Chicago, DC, and Delaware, the smallest state in the union. And I literally jogged across the whole damn state. It was only 9 miles from one side to the other at one point. They don't even have an airport there. You got to fly into Philly still and get ground transport. And that's where the Democratic Party presidential candidate is from, the smallest state in the union, which was replete with racism at the time and still is. Okay, let's see. I got a fellowship, ran into some guys at Howard University Law School, and I did a community lawyer thing. It's called the Reginald Herbert Smith Community Lawyer Fellowship. So for 2 years, I did that in Tennessee, where I got sent. I didn't want to go there, but I got sent there. Wound up staying and worked with EEOC. Then I became the first black prosecutor for the city of Memphis. And then I ran the public defender's office as the chief public defender. And about 1978, I went into private practice. And I also specialized in criminal trial law. I had 42 first degree murder cases where they demanded the death penalty that I tried as chief counsel. A bunch of other homicide cases, rapes, robberies, burglaries, you name it. I got the youngest person in the world off death row through a unanimous decision by the Arkansas Supreme Court. He was only 15, had been that for 2 weeks when he was scheduled to be executed, and I got a stay of execution from then Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas and the Arkansas Supreme Court at the same time. There were about 20 old-time ground line phones in the room, and they all had red lights on them so you could see which one was ringing. And the warden, myself, and local counsel, we were all in that room, and when the rings came on, we dived for the phones. So we each swapped phones so we could verify what we were hearing. I got him, well, I got all of the conviction set aside. So he wound up getting killed later on, but he didn't get, put on a slab and injected. So let's see. I was also the last judge on that James Earl Ray case. And had Ray not died, and it looked like I was going to be put back on the case for the fourth time after they tried to get me off because I was supposedly biased in favor of the truth getting out. But anyway, the rifle that killed Martin Luther King did not belong to James Earl Ray. The FBI supplied the rifle and the ammunition. I even have a line on the serial numbers for what the rifle, for the murder weapon. There were 5 of the weapons that would match the very strange ballistics that characterized the bullet they pulled out of Dr. King's body, and the FBI had been issued 5 of them on invoice in late December 1967, along with 5,000 rounds of this very peculiar ammunition. Well, the Defense Department wanted them back, and Robert Kennedy issued an order as Attorney General for them to be returned, and the FBI in late April on inventory claimed they'd lost one. That's the murder weapon. Also, an interesting something I have not disclosed before, that 760 Game Master that Ray had bought was, interestingly enough, the same 760 Remington Game Master that the FBI was issued. So they got 870 Remington 12 gauge shotguns and 760 30 caliber Remington Game Master. So I found that interesting considering the rest of the circumstances and the tacky investigation that the FBI did not do and the faked ballistics test that they never really did. So the American public has some answers that needs to be provided. I don't think we'll ever know who did the killing because it was a 2-man team who fired the shot from the fire station, and they were military. They just got a visit and told, we got another mission for you. And at the time and place, they probably would have relished it.
Mhm.
Now, all of that aside,
That's some good
they
information.
came and got me and said, Mike, would you like to do this television show? I said, oh, you mean be a guest? I said, sure. No, Mike, you don't show here. I said, okay, fine. I got this bridge I want to sell you. But see, I'd been on 60 Minutes, Ed Bradley Street Stories, ABC Nightly News, and all of that for my sentencing things. I knew that what you saw was the tip of the iceberg, and I had put in this program where I would have the defendants man up so that when they looked in the mirror, you know,
Hmm.
they'd have a cause because the cause was themselves and manhood, which has some dictates that you can't deviate from. Like down with the gang, down with the posse, well, down with manhood, and manhood's got some ironclad obligations. See, most of what they call toxic masculinity is not toxic masculinity, it's the lack of masculinity. And I heard them plotting more than 50 years ago on the UCLA's campus and other places around the country on how they were going to get people to believe that masculinity was toxic because they said it was the enemy of humanity. Yeah, sure. They had this thing about it's men that caused war. So the way to stop war was to change the way boys were raised to men. So if you raised them like girls and they grew up to emote like women when they became adults, that would somehow stop war.
Mm.
Unisex child rearing, no war toys, cap guns, water guns, anything like that. Encourage them to play with dolls, to be in touch with their softer emotive side. You had the nascent gay crowd that ultimately morphed into LGBTQ, and they didn't like the straight male agenda. Then you had the lesbian crowd that looked at being married as a form of slavery. And then you had the beta boys who, soy boys, they were white but couldn't make it in a white man's world. So all of the above contributed to some poison. Hollywood was going under because at that time the movie industry was almost bankrupt in the face of color television.
Hmm.
Every Thursday and every Sunday, every theater had two new movies. So you would walk in anytime, pay 50 cents, which was the usual adult fare, and you would get to see two feature length films, three cartoons, and some smaller special. Walk in whenever you felt like it, sit as long as you want. That meant every major studio had to produce 150, 200 movies a year. So somebody came up with the bright idea of let's give them one movie and let it stay in the theater as long as it still gets good attendance. That'll save production cost and ramp the price up to $1.50 from 50 cents, and we can make more money. So they also came up with black exploitation movies. They figured that black folk would be starving for attention. So when you did something that dealt with them, they would flock to the movie houses. And Hollywood was saved by the black exploitation film. And that morphed into a deliberate intent to sow destruction, dysfunction, and glorify it because black folk then, if you wanted to be into something, you were going to college, you had on a suit and tie, or at least a sport coat. You knew something about your world and something about your history, and you were going to get a good job. Then they started glorifying dysfunction. So the thug, the hoe, the pimp, the drug dealer, the murderer, the thief, the rogue, they became the ideal. And that's what that community was pushing. And how did they get in touch with it? Well, these folk who had these determinations about messing up the country because they wanted to get rid of manhood, well, the ordinary people were failing Hollywood, so they got fired and they hired these young new hotshots to come in, and they've been running their program and their agenda for the last 50 years, and the people have bought into this glorification of dysfunction.
So, have you ever worked in any programs to kind of help the dysfunction?
Well, let's put it this way. The statewide recidivism rate over this 10-year period they were doing the study was about 80%. In my courtroom, I got it down to 18, secret manhood. And one of the things that you run into with young black males is, yo, man, like I ain't got no daylight at the end of my tunnel, man. I'm 22. I ain't going to see 24. Well, so damn what? That means you've got a duty, honor, obligation, and responsibility thing that you have to deal with. It's your job to get those people you're responsible for through that tunnel to kill all those fire-breathing Gila monsters that are setting fire to that tunnel and causing all of the obscuring smoke. And even if you don't get to the end of it, you become a hero who dealt with getting his people to the end of it. But you see, they took that out of the equation, and today's youth have no purpose. Interestingly enough, this stuff you see going on in the inner cities, where if you get the news feeds, you'll see out of every 11 people on average, 9, 10 of them are white. They aren't black. And they're using it as an ecology cause. Oh my God, we have to save the polar bear. Oh, they're suffering because the Arctic ice caps are melting. And poor Oscar, he's chained outside in a kettle and he'll never know love. And the tigers and the elephants, they're getting slaughtered. And they once used to rule the jungle. Now they don't anymore. So send 1995 a month to ASPCA and we will send you a picture of your adopted tiger so you can show what your love is doing, or 1995 a month to BLM, Black Lives Matter, and you can save an Afro biped. They've been imported over to America and they've escaped from the farms, well, plantations, no, farms, and they don't know what to do with themselves, and they're being shot down by these boys in blue who like to hunt them. Oh my God. Yeah.
Where did you get that voice from?
Oh man, I was, man, last week, man, we got out, man, we were partying, man. We were on the 12th floor, man. We trashed the hotel, man. Like, we really messed it up, man. I was drunk, man. I threw up 3-4 times, man. See, that's what they're doing with what you're looking at. It's an extended, exciting spring break. They've got cabin fever due to COVID-19, so it's not even a long, hot summer. They're calling this stuff rioting, and there's 200 people, same 200 night after night. It isn't like the whole city's turning out. They need to crack down on it, crack some heads, and restore some public order. And maybe if the ratchet little cupcakes got the idea that it was dangerous and they weren't going to be shot at with rubber bullets that they can use umbrellas to stop, they get the idea that, hey, maybe we need to go get home and go deal with, man, I was really wasted, man. So I'm not impressed. This is not a black thing. This is a front off thing. So you can send in $19.95 a month to BLM to save the Afro bipeds from getting gunned down and hunted by all of these careless hunters who don't deal with fair chase, who like to wear blue. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Look at Chicago. That idiot, Lightfoot, the mayor, did one of the most abysmally stupid things I have ever seen, and the media isn't even telling you what's actually going on. She took community development funds and gave the money directly to some Hispanic street gangs. And they used the money to buy arms ripped off from, I guess, that boxcars that got ripped off in the rail yard, and supply up. So you've got Hispanic street gangs gunning down black boys and black street gangs gunning down brown boys. And it's a hellacious mess. And the police are being told to back off, treat it with kid gloves, let them get it out of their systems. And the only reason they're being allowed to do that is because they're ratchet little white cupcakes. Nothing against white people, but if they were black, they'd be getting shot up. But they're not black. And they're running around with a communication system. They've got lawyers already set up, so when they get busted, they quickly get put out on bond. Uh,
Yeah.
and I have a sneaking suspicion that Antifa has some interesting connections. Their communications devices are rather advanced, and they seem to have a logistics back up that supply. So there are convenient stacks of bricks, communications, letting them know through BLM, which says on its site that it helps organize demonstrations. So they're using BLM as a call in so they can arrange where something's going to go down.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't the Jewish Defense League or the Anti Defamation League that is hooked up to get a little revenge on the Aryan Nation, American Nazi Party type, KKK types, etc., etc. But they're not responding like they ought to, and it's getting out of hand. And the more they let it go on, the more they condition the general public to saying this is acceptable. And pretty soon you're going to get other folks saying, let's get in on the fun. This looks interesting. Maybe we can snag some merchandise out of the window of a department store.
Mm. Yeah, I get it. So let's see if you have any questions, because you got a lot of people out there making comments. They are enjoying your stories, and they're being enlightened by a lot of things that we didn't know about until
Well,
today.
the media doesn't report this. See, look, CNN wrecked the news industry. It
Mm.
almost went bankrupt in the 80s until the Gulf War hit, 1990, 1991, and then there was sufficient material to cover 24/7. So when the Gulf War died down, what are you going to cover? There's not enough news to cover 24/7. So they started making it entertaining, and they had talking heads. George, what do you think we're looking at? Well, Al, it looks like a burning wood cabin out in the woods, and it's smoldering. Yes, George, it does look like it's smoldering. Hell, any fool looking at the same feed they're looking at can tell it's smoldering. What do you think happened, George? I don't know, Al. Maybe there was a suspect in there. Well, George, maybe you're right. I don't know, but perhaps they had information. Well, have you heard anything, Al, about whether they found any bodies? Well, I don't know, George, but what the devil is all of that? And then you see it degenerates into a sham on the public. I've talked to Trayvon Martin's mother. I interviewed her several times, and I finally got to meet her, and I was sitting next to her at a function. And she says, may I ask you a question, Judge? I said, what is that, ma'am? She said, why would Anderson Cooper ask me not to reveal what Trayvon's grandfather does? I said, well, what does he do? He's a lieutenant detective with the Miami Police Department. That's what his dad does. So, in other words, why did he ask me not to let anybody know that? I said, ma'am, because the no good charlatan wanted to ramp up the ratings by having the posture of, is this a thug in the hoodie? And is Zimmerman not Cubano but Jewish? Where somebody is, oh my God, trying to defend their neighborhoods, and then all this nonsense about no retreat and they needed to end it, and Castle Doctrine, which had nothing to do with it. And by the way, Castle Doctrine, let's look at Breonna Taylor. Tragic situation. Some
Mm-hmm.
people have been clamoring to have police officers prosecuted. Question is, what for? See, let's take this from two perspectives. The boyfriend is in there.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody breaks off in there under the Castle Doctrine, he's got a right to open fire without question. He does.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He's not charged because he has committed no crime. The police, they have a sworn duty to uphold the law. And what happens is somebody on the department was negligent and got a warrant with the wrong address on it. The warrant is sent to them. They have to execute the warrant, otherwise they are liable for dereliction of duty. They go and the warrant says suspect likely to be armed and dangerous. So based on that, they get in there and shots are fired at them. What happens? Just like you see in all the movies you like to go watch. The police shoot back. They miss the guy that's shooting at them, but the bullets go through the sheetrock and 7 of them strike Breonna Taylor, who is in bed and she's tragically killed. Is there a crime? No, it's a tragedy. Just like you're driving down the freeway or the highway at night and all of a sudden you hit glare ice and you and a bunch of cars get to sliding helter skelter and there's a massive pileup and some people die. Has anybody committed any crime? No, it's a tragedy. So that was the castle doctrine. People saying black folks shouldn't arm because that would give you, see, you're going to die if you arm. But here's some guy opened up on the police. He's walking around now, no charge, because he did what was within his rights. It was a tragedy, but a lot of ignoramuses are running around talking about Breonna Taylor's murderers need to be tried. It's nothing they did criminal. It's negligence, and there should be very large settlement or recovery against the city. Now, let's get to another thing where the wrong people got charged with the wrong thing. Let's look at Mr. Floyd. Well, I've been taking martial arts for 55 years, and everybody thinks the cop with the knee to the neck killed Mr. Floyd. He didn't. That just occludes the carotid network on one side of the neck. What will happen is the person will feel like he's at 12, 15, 14,000 feet altitude, and he can't engage in much physical activity. You can hold that for a long time. What killed him? Well, the next cop that wasn't a rookie, he decided to get in on the action, put his knee in Mr. Floyd's back. Mr. Floyd at that point has mechanical difficulty in breathing. He starts thrashing, which is the body's reflex, and then 2 rookies following the lead of their training officer put knees in his back. Those 3 killed him, but they're only charged as accessories instead of principals because the prosecutor is ignorant of what he's been looking at or she's been looking at. There's also some allegations of organized crime activity on that block. And the question begs itself of how does this jump from somebody trying to pass a bogus $20 bill in an area where those bogus $20 bills are supposed to have come from? What's the organized crime setup? Has anybody looked into that? So where is this going? There's more to this than meets the eye. So it all depends on what you're looking at, what you know. So you got one man charged with killing Floyd. He's the one that enabled it, but he didn't kill him. The other 3 did. That technique was taught by several instructors with the LA Police Department. But LA police said, no, you can't do that. That looked too bad. We don't want any more Rodney King moments. And those instructors put it out on the net. And this guy picked it up without understanding the risk. He went ahead and did it. And then you have ignoramus coming in, who is a seasoned officer, deciding he wants to get in on the fun and put a knee in the guy's back. He's already controlled. That knee and the other 2 put in his back killed him. So, but they aren't charged with being principals in the homicide, only accessories.
Wow. That's a lot. Let's see.
Ignorance is a mess, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Let's see if you have any questions out there, because you have given us an earful and everyone is buzzing in. The ratings has probably been the highest since this show has been on. So let's see.
Well, I had the highest rated male show in Hollywood for several years. You know, I used to beat Oprah every week in the ratings, and Phil too.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, but they didn't want you to know that because they didn't want you to know a straight black man was the highest paid man in Hollywood, with the exception of from time to time Leslie Moonves got bonuses.
Hmm.
Now, how about that for all of these half-stepping Negroes who want to bend over and drop their boxers, saying it's what they have to do to keep their jobs? I got paid more than they did, and I wasn't half-stepping.
Wow. Well, whew. Did you ever meet Judge, what's his name? Judge Mathis?
Yes.
Did you like him?
I don't look kindly on anybody that ever joined a gang.
Okay.
And he didn't have a father around. I did. And I'm a lot older than he is. I like Judge Alex.
Okay.
What's
I
the
don't think
lady from Atlanta? Um, Attractive sister, short hair.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember her name, but I know who you're talking about. Hmm. You've met her?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I don't see any questions. Everyone is saying great accomplishments, very informative. Um, yeah.
See, let me say something. It's a lot of things depend upon attitude and outlook.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
look at dead folk as business.
Hmm.
All right. I earned fees by defending folk accused of making dead folk.
Hmm. Hmm.
I have been in morgues and I have been in the medical examiner's office where there's a rotten corpse with maggots crawling all through it. And unlike CSI, where they glamorize these folk, we call them morgue monsters or less savory things because somebody's in there with maggots on his rubber gloves and he's shaking them off and going over to take a bite of his Subway sandwich. You know, like, okay. And you can smell it when you walk in the entrance to the place, the decay.
Hmm.
And that's a reality that most people don't get to understand. People say, well, how come it's taking them so long to investigate? It takes a while. There's somebody that did a lot of criminal investigation defending some of my clients.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes nothing gets done until in the middle of the night you wake up and say, that's what happened. Let me go check that out. And then, yeah. And then you get a lead and, like, I want to talk with you. I don't want to have anything said. And then get a call. Yeah, who is this? Oh, okay. Oh, you decided to talk now. What happened? All right. Another thing. See, a lot of these people are doing what they want to do is a dream who are involved in the criminal justice system. A lot of them got run home from school too often, so they're getting revenge. A lot of them are fearful and they're trying to show that they're not fearful and they're scared. And they don't go to the crime scenes because sometimes the crime scene is nasty. Like, for example, you had a crime scene and somebody says the murderer was right next to the jukebox and he took two steps and shot the victim in the side of the head who was sitting at this table. Well,
Hmm.
you go to the scene and you realize the prosecutor hasn't been there, and some lazy cop heard it from some other lazy cop. And instead of it being two steps from the jukebox to where the victim was sitting, you got the entirety of the whole ballroom, and it's about 30 yards away. So, how does he take two steps to get from the jukebox all the way on the other side of this rather large structure? See, it doesn't happen. So then you get the idea when you start going around and asking questions. The witnesses against this guy didn't like him, but they disliked the victim more than they disliked this guy. So they killed him and decided it was a nice convenient way to tie up the threads by blaming somebody else. Or you got a murder trial going on, and you've got one set of witnesses for the state who are trying to condemn this guy for supposedly gunning down someone, and then the state's got this bloody clothing, but the problem is the bloody clothing doesn't belong to the dead man. It belongs to the man that the dead man was trying to rob, and his own guy shot him in the back of the head. And as soon as they got through testifying, another set of detectives were arresting them because they were wanted for multiple other murders and robberies. So you got the wrong person there. Or you got a situation where the evidence, a briefcase, is being passed around. It's been in police custody for months, and it gets to the last alternate, the 14th person sitting up there, and the guy holds his hands up and said, "Your Honor," he said, "what is it, sir?" I'm not the judge. I'm one of the lawyers, right?
Mm-hmm.
"What is it, sir?" "There's about 3 pounds of marijuana in this briefcase." Judge said, "What?" "It 3 pounds of marijuana." So it'd been sitting in the evidence room. Nobody realized it was in there. This kind of thing.
So what do they do with it?
Well, it's too late now to charge anybody with it. So he walked on the murder case.
Interesting. You have a question. Someone asked, what do you consider systematic racism and how it exists?
Systematic racism starts at the top. We don't vote for district attorneys, and the district attorneys back up what you look at is racism on the streets. The judges are the gatekeepers to that, because if the cop behaves in a racist fashion and the judge is fair and impartial, neutral, and detached, he or she would suppress this evidence. But because they are cowards and they don't want to lose the jobs that they need, because a lot of them couldn't make it into practice of law, they will not rule like they're supposed to. So that backs up these cops who act inappropriately. The next thing is the control factor, is the jury. And to this day, 30 years after I first started being judge, I still get calls. Judge Brown, just so-and-so. I say, "Yeah, aren't you so-and-so's nephew?" "Yes, sir. I just got a question. My uncle said I can ask you." "And what is that, son?" "How do I get out of jury duty?" I said, "I'm not going to tell you. You need to serve." "Oh, but Judge, see, I got to." "No, see, I've heard you at some of your own family gatherings start bitching about how justice is just us. Well, I'm going to help you make sure it's not just us. You're going to sit in there, and I'm going to talk about you if I find out that you tried to cop out and give the answers that would get you excluded. Shut your mouth, be on the jury, and administer justice." Also, some of the people that are telling you about how wrong they got done, "Mama, they just putting the case on me." "What the hell do you mean they're putting the case on you? I'm your lawyer." "Well, I wasn't there." "What do you mean you weren't there? You're trying to tell me dude was lying because he couldn't have seen you because you were in the shadows behind the dumpster and he was trying to light up a cigarette over by the phone pole. How do you know that?" "Well, see, I wasn't there because he couldn't see me where I was." "Wait a minute. There's 7 people ID you. 3 of them gave the police your mama's address, which is where they found you." "What do you mean?" "Well, see, they couldn't see me because I was in the shadows." "Well, you were there, fool. Obviously, you weren't in shadows that deep because they ID'd you." Or, okay, here's one. Gentlemen, we're going to have the motion to suppress heard, but first the court wishes to view the tape of the purported confession. Defense, state, are you ready? Madam Court Reporter, you need 5 minutes to set up back in chambers, court's chambers. All right, we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. And you're looking at this, and the police advised this guy 8 times he needs to have a lawyer. He's going, "I don't want no lawyer. I want my mama. Y'all ain't mean to me. I want my mama." It's snot running all down his face, tears running down his eyes. Well, sir, your mother can't be here, but if you'd like, we can bring in a lawyer. We suggest you need to talk. Oh, Mom, talking to nobody about my mama. Don't let her know what I did. I tell you everything. Then they try to implicate all their homies. Meanwhile, out in the courtroom on the recess, OG dude is going for back. Yay, man, I'm down with the cause, man. They trying to put this on me, man. Like, I wasn't going to let nobody know who the posse was, man. And then I'd go out and embarrass them. The court has viewed the tape. The defendant in this case was advised on no less than 8 times that he needed a lawyer. The officer stopped the interrogation. The defendant was crying with mucus running down his face, used up most of a small brand new container of Kleenex, crying and carrying on. He wanted his mama. They kept telling him his mama couldn't be present during the interrogation. He is, 28 years old. And he tried to implicate several people. In fact, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them are in the courtroom, if I'm not mistaken, because they've been identified as witnesses. And the court's going to direct that they be taken into custody immediately. No bond set at this time. We will have a bond hearing because of the implication in this Class A felony. All right. See, I'd break that up, but you see, they'd lie. Mama ain't done nothing. They're just trying to put a case on me. See, man, they didn't have no evidence on me. Fool, you confessed. See, this is something. All of these folk in the penitentiary, just over 2% are in there because they got found guilty by a jury. 97 plus pled guilty. And out of that 97 plus, 84 to 87% confessed. And if you look at the confession, see, the new police tactic is reverse psychology. They try to talk the guy out of his confession. You need a lawyer. But I didn't want them to say, y'all ain't going to mess with me. Well, we can't promise you anything, but you want to get it off your chest. And we always are religious. You can go to hell if you don't tell the truth. I did it. So-and-so was there with me. See, if you in American law, you cannot convict somebody on the uncorroborated evidence of an accomplice. So what happens is if the guy that's implicated just kept his mouth shut, they wouldn't have a case on him. Like this Johnson woman that Kimmy girl Sladassian got Trump the pardon. I had 6 first-degree murder cases in my courtroom where it came out she took the hits out. But you can't prosecute her just off of that because nobody next to her would confess. They just said, hell no, I want a lawyer. So this one old lady, a grandmother, just had a small bag of Coke trying to save her house. She was only in her 30s then. She wasn't much of a grandmama. And she got caught with 4,400 pounds of pure cocaine with enough cutting agents to come up with between 18 and 24,000 pounds of street coke and $87 million in cash. And that's who got pardoned. Wow. I guess Trump is serious about prison reform, but there are a lot of people in federal witness protection programs because Miss Drug Queen Penn was running the cocaine and crack trade from New Orleans to Louisville to St. Louis to Kansas City to Chicago. But she's out, I guess maybe somebody won't kill her because there were a whole lot of dead folk back in the late 80s and 90s thanks to that woman, allegedly. Allegedly,
right. I so do appreciate you coming on here telling us all these good stories, but we have run out of time. This has been so, I wish I had another hour with you, but goodness, this has been so enlightening and my audience has just loved you. So I appreciate your time and your stories telling from the beginning to the end. So what's next for you? You just going to keep being retired?
Well, I'm trying to find somebody to recruit to be the next leader since we don't have one. You realize nobody's been assassinated for political activity who's black in 50 years since Fred Hampton.
Yes, sir.
And he was 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
See,
I get it, but we're gonna find them. Everybody needs to
and
go.
see, let me warn people of something.
Tell them.
Quit talking this nonsense about we need to get some land and have our own separate nation. You don't have the resources for an army. And if you set it up, somebody like me would be taking a lot of you, putting you on a wall and shooting you and imposing dictatorial control over you so you would learn or get fed or get taught and instructed in what you needed to know to be a free people.
See.
Be careful what you ask for, you might get it.
Judge Joe Brown, people. Judge Joe Brown for president.
I'm too old.
I'm gonna let you go. I appreciate talking to you. I'm gonna check up on you tomorrow, though. I'm gonna see how you doing. Okay.
Okay, here you go. 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up. Thank you for coming.
Thumbs.
I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Have a good night.